Hello and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Coen. On this episode, we're going to focus on infrastructure and a project that's been drawing a lot of attention in the South Stafford area. It's officially referred to as the Rappahannock River Crossing Project. The project is designed to improve I-95 congestion by providing local traffic an additional route to travel between US 17 and Route 3 and the city of Fredericksburg, particularly Central Park. The project proposes to accomplish this by building a bridge across the Rappahannock River. The Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, FAMPO, sponsored an information meeting this past November. It also has hired a consulting firm, Michael Baker International, to help study the issue and propose solutions. FAMPO and MBI have focused on 5 potential river crossings. They're hoping to narrow the choice down to 1 or 2 options soon. The route chosen would need to be approved by FAMPO as well as the Fredericksburg and Stafford County elected officials. It wouldn't be built for another 10 years, and the price tag is probably more around $200 million. So that's your basic background for tonight's conversation. To help us consider the project in more detail, we've invited Ian Ollis onto the program. Ian is the administrator for FAMPO, so he's a great person to get a deep dive into this project and learn about it firsthand. Well, hello, Ian, and welcome to Stafford Connect.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
First of all, we usually have people introduce themselves to our Stafford community. You've been around for a while at FAMPO and really active in our community, but why don't you give us a little bit about yourself for the people who don't quite know you as well as many of us do?
Sure. So I'm in my 5th year now in Fredericksburg at the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, FAMPO. So I work there, and I've been here for just over 4.5 years now, which is great. Originally from South Africa, grew up in South Africa. My mom is still there, and I've lived in Boston. I've lived in Fredericksburg. Currently, I live in southern Alexandria in Virginia. So I've been in Virginia for a while. I introduced myself at a conference, and they said, "Tell us your name and where you're from." So I said, "My name's Ian, and I'm from Virginia." And they all kind of looked at me funny with my accent, like, "You really from Virginia?" So yeah, I get the looks, But yeah, I've been here in the area, Stafford and Fredericksburg area, for the last 4.5 years.
And your schooling background is pretty impressive, if I might say.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
I went to high school in South Africa, and I went to seminary for a while. Then I went and got a master's in arts. Then I moved to Boston and went back to college at the ripe old age of 45, I think, 46. Something like that. I got a master's in transportation planning at MIT. And then down here, just finished doing my certification with the American Institute of Certified Planners. So I'm now an officially certified planner.
Wow. And you seem to be one of those people that's always learning and always trying to learn more, which is a good life skill. So the focus of the discussion today is about transportation, which is near and dear and deep in many people's hearts in our area. And you mentioned about FAMPO, so why don't we just start off with giving us some idea what FAMPO does, so that people who are not used to all the different letters understand what it is that the planning organization does and what your role is in it.
Sure. So we are a planning organization for transportation specifically, and we're supposed to be the watchdog on regional transportation planning. So we do some of the planning ourselves. We have planning studies. We also allocate funding to projects. So we get federal and state money every year, which FAMPO has to prioritize and allocate to projects in Stafford, the city of Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania County, which we do in cycles. It's currently about $6.5 million a year, which isn't a lot. If you want to build a sidewalk, that's not going to get you a lot of sidewalks, so it's not a huge amount of money. But we do prioritize those funds, And then we work with localities to also apply for state funding in the Smart Scale program and federal funding for projects, all kinds of transportation projects. So we take things from an idea. Somebody has an idea. We turn it eventually into a study. We finish the study, which makes recommendations. We turn that into a funding application, sometimes with money that we allocate, sometimes mostly with state money, sometimes federal money. And then eventually those things go to either VDOT or the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to be constructed. So it's a whole process that we're involved in. But we're mostly on the planning end. We're not on the construction end.
And there's this idea of doing regional planning is something that Virginia's been very strong on. Aren't there a number of these organizations?
So it's a federal body. We're federally mandated. In 1962, Congress enacted legislation to create regional planning institutions called MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations. So they've been around since 1962. And every time, and what the Census Bureau calls an urbanized area gets above 50,000 people, you're required to have a planning organization. And so there are currently over 420 of these metropolitan planning organizations around the country that are federally mandated. But the boards that make them up are always made up of local elected officials plus some transportation advisory members as well. So FAMPO has 9 local supervisors and city councilmen and women from the city of Fredericksburg and the 2 counties. And then there's a representative of the Secretary for Transportation and a thing called the Potomac and Rappahannock PRTC, Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission. It's always a mouthful to try and remember what that acronym entails. But if you've seen the Omni Ride buses, that's them. So they have a seat on the board as well. So we have 11 members on our board.
And so is it possible for local people to get involved in the MPOs, or is it just that they contact their board members?
So we have 4 committees at FAMPO. So the policy committee is the board that makes the final decisions. But we have a technical advisory committee. We have a citizens transportation advisory committee. We have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee. And so local residents who are not elected officials or qualified transportation planners are welcome to serve on those other committees. Typically, their county or city would nominate them to be a representative on those committees. So the nominations are made by each locality. We want these people on that committee, and then we facilitate it. But yeah, you can serve on those committees. But if you don't want to serve on a committee, you might just want to give us comments, right? You have a project, we like it or we don't like it, or we think it would be nice if you changed it, which is usually what happens. So we receive from the public written comments. They can call us, they can come to a meeting and stand up and give their opinion in the meetings. So all of our committees have a time for public comment. So you can say it 4 times if you wish. You can go around all the committees, and some people do. So there's opportunity for local folks to come along and have their say, or to write us a letter or an email, or to join one of the committees. So there is space for the public to really get involved.
Awesome. And I know from nominating some people to it, they've all appreciated the different ones and your leadership in them. One of the things that I've heard from many people and I've witnessed myself is your leadership style, and it's very much a sense of that people feel input, that it's not as though it's being dictated to them and whatnot. And so that's a really good quality trait. I've said that to you on many occasions.
Yeah. I think also the thing is, because I'm originally from outside of the region, I don't get seen as, oh, well, you're just with them, right? So I don't favor one locality over another, and I think that also helps. So a good idea is a good idea no matter who says it, right? I think of a particular gentleman long ago who had a really good idea, but he explained it so badly that nobody listened, right? And so what I try to do sometimes highlight that idea, because the guy actually has a good idea, but he's just not a public spokesperson. He doesn't have the public speaking skills. But that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means that that's not his particular strength, is standing up in front of 100 people and arguing his case. But that doesn't mean the idea is bad. So sometimes I'll say, wait, we went to a meeting and that person said, why don't we try this? Whether or not it gets put into the plan is up to the people who vote. But at least we hear divergent ideas. We had somebody from the Friends of the Rappahannock, just one gentleman from there who made a comment when we did a presentation. And I first said, no, that's not a good idea. And then I thought about it afterwards and I thought, actually, why is it such a bad idea? And then I presented it to our committees. I said, we weren't thinking of this, but this gentleman suggested, why don't we try changing the road like this? And I don't know whether it's going to go anywhere. Maybe the residents around there won't like it, but at least we give voice to those ideas, not just our own ideas. Sometimes a resident will spark an idea that's interesting and different. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but at least so I try to look for ideas that are different to what I imagined, but give people a chance to have their say.
And people feel ownership if they feel as though they've heard. And that, for the large point, and we've said this on the program often, is that's one of the things that people are crying out for, is that they feel as though they're heard. And so by you doing that, and in different other ways that you get input into the different projects, you give them that, which is really a great thing, because that's a need in our community right now.
Yeah.
So just giving you more warm fuzzies.
Thank you. Sometimes somebody's got to make a decision, and then there's going to be like a third of the people who won't like it. That's just life.
That is.
So eventually someone's got to vote. I don't get a vote. So I just give opinions, and then we see how everybody votes, right? So.
That's right. And that's when all the other stuff comes into play. So does FAMPO have a particular mission as far as our area is concerned, or a particular focus, and then I'll get into, does it shift with different boards when they shift?
Yeah. So our aim is to make layman's language. Our aim is to make transportation better for everybody, travel better for everybody. But there are different modes of transportation. We really don't do much for air travel. So we're not really we might look at the access road to an airport, but we don't really do air travel. Our mandate is land-based transportation. We don't do shipping either, really. But we do freight. So we look at freight movements. We look at people traveling in their cars. We look at traveling on trains and buses, and people who walk and ride bikes, because there's safety issues involved with all of that, and we want people to be safe. So it's the gamut of transportation, but excluding shipping and air travel, we only really do access. So an access road to the harbor we would work on, or an access road to an airport, but we're not going to get involved in the actual ships and the actual aircraft. That's not our mandate. We do the infrastructure leading to all modes of transportation, including modes of transportation. So all of those modes, and our mission is to try and make it, to make travel better for everybody.
Cool. All right. And so ultimately, who makes the decisions for FAMPO?
So FAMPO has the board that I was telling you about earlier, which is 11 people, and they all get one vote. And the board makes decisions. We try to make decisions by consensus, but, people don't always agree. And so then we have a roll call vote to determine what the official position of FAMPO is. And if I look back on the 4.5 years I've been here, we've actually got consensus most of the time. There have been one or two rough, banging of the heads and saying, no, I don't agree, and then we've taken a roll call vote. But that's been rare, actually. Once or twice, very vocal, but rare. The general operation has been to have general consensus on a topic. So sometimes we don't even vote. If everybody around the room says, yeah, let's just get this done, we just get it done.
Right.
So it's been, and there's been a lot of good-natured teasing and stuff which helps lighten the mood and helps people to compromise easier. And I think that's a better way to argue, is to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think we get that a lot. Now and again, somebody says something, and I think I wouldn't have said that. But I think generally we get a good debate and then make decisions.
So, a real quick question. You mentioned about smart scale. For anybody who's not obsessive compulsive about this, and you don't have to get into the weeds or into the
Sure.
tar and the asphalt about it. But what generally is the business about smart scale?
So smart scale is the way that Virginia allocates funding to projects as a state. So the state created this smart scale program from nothing to try to minimize decisions all being made by political means to pick funding for projects. The idea was to try and get objective criteria. Where is the congestion the worst? Where is the safety concerns? Where are the safety concerns the highest? Where have there been a lot of crashes? We need to do something about safety. Where's the congestion bad? We need to do something about congestion. Where are the sidewalks missing? We need to fix those. So the attempt is to score projects on some objective criteria and then hand out the money to the projects that score well. So that's the general idea. The state says, we've got X amount of money. Tell us which projects you want. And then they look at those projects, they score them, and then allocate money to usually the projects that score well, and it's done every second year. So it's a 2-year cycle of designing projects, planning projects, and then submitting your applications for funding, and then they score them, and then we see what the result is. And it's been going, this is the 6th cycle, so it's 12 years now that it's been going. And it's better than a bunch of people get in a dark room and just decide who to hand the money to. This is more, does this project merit the money? So there's more sort of eyes on the project than eyes on the politics. There's always a little politics, but it's a much better system than it was. So.
Awesome. All right. So a major topic going on in our region right now is the Rappahannock River Bridge crossing. So we might as well delve into that a little bit.
Yes.
And can you give us sort of a history of how and why this project came to be?
So one man told me last week that he's been working on this bridge for 30 years, right? What we do know is that there have been multiple attempts to build a crossing of the Rappahannock River west of I-95. And so far, none has succeeded. Some have got to the stage of acquiring land and then they've abandoned them. And it's for political reasons, or it's for environmental reasons, or it's for financial reasons. So there's always been a combination of reasons why the previous version got voted down or got blocked or whatever the case is. So we're trying again. So, who knows? One time we'll eventually get it right, where the money and the politics and the environment will line up and we'll be able to build it. And also the local impacts. So we look at local impacts, which is part of the environmental assessment. So this round, we're trying again. And the city of Fredericksburg and the county of Stafford sent us a note saying, please, would you investigate? So we've been, or research. So we've been working on this study with a consulting firm. And we presented a set of options to the policy committee at FAMPO, and we've also presented now options to the public on 2 occasions. And just had a public engagement meeting in November, I believe, and put out a survey through December and early January. And we shared the results on Monday night of what the public think about these options. And the consultant is now weighing up the traffic assessment, the environmental assessment of what, where are there wetlands, where are there rivers, where are there things that you need to avoid, and how much impact will this bridge have on the traffic pattern? Will it help congestion? Will it make it worse? And we've had the public input showing people at these various public engagements what their options are that are practical. and got that input, and now they're going to come with a recommendation soon, probably March, at the policy committee in March, with a recommendation of which option the consultant feels would be the best solution in this particular situation. So we don't yet know which is the best option, but they're working already on the options that are available. They said in November, December, of the 5 options that are available, that they would recommend 2 of them and see whether the public agrees with that. So we're now evaluating what the public said, and there's several hundred handwritten or typed up comments. So that's going to take a while to get through all of those. But there are probably 1 or 2 options that look feasible, and some others that the environmental impact is too high. So one of the options that was proposed would go up Greenbank Road, but it'd have to be widened to 4 lanes. And I think I can say, without letting the cat out the bag, that the general feeling is that too many homes would be impacted by widening Greenbank Road to 4 lanes. So it's unlikely that a new river crossing would connect up Greenbank Road and widen Greenbank Road to 4 lanes. It would impact too many houses. Too many people's homes would be affected, and it's probably not going to be recommended because it's too impactful. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. We're waiting to get the final recommendation. We don't have it yet. And then FAMPO has to decide whether they like that recommendation and whether they'd like to pursue it, or whether they think the second choice is a better one. So we'll see.
Right. And I think we have some visual. For the people that are watching this on YouTube, you can see the visual. The people who are listening to this can go to the FAMPO website. If you're watching, we have behind us some different options. So the one that you were just saying was option D, which, if you're watching, is in orange, which is on the farthest western point of this. If there's 95, and then there's 17, and the Greenbank one was D, and you're saying that one you'd have to take. It would impact loads of homes. So
yeah, at the moment, Greenbank Road is just 2 lanes, mm-hmm. and the problem with widening it to 4 lanes is that some of those homes are built really close to those 2 lanes. So if you want to widen it and add another 2 lanes, you're going from, say, 40 feet to, say, 80 feet. That comes off the front yards of all those homes. And some of the houses, 1 or 2 houses, are built real close to the road as it is. So we think a number of homes will have to be taken, and we think that that's going to be difficult for those folks who live there, and so we think that that's unlikely to be chosen. It's possible that a combination of these other options might still be chosen, mm-hmm. but that portion of option D, which is on the Greenbank Road, I feel comfortable in saying that it's unlikely to be chosen because of the impact on local homes and on families that live there.
And so we'll just talk about this, then we'll go back to a point of the rationale or the reasoning for this, because you did a long study, and it was very interesting the length and breadth of that study. So before we go backwards, back to that. We'll get done with this. So one, option A, is closer to 95, and it ties over to Gordon Shelton Boulevard in the city.
Yep.
The other ones would go down Celebrate Virginia Parkway, all the B1, B2, and C, and then it would just diverge from that way, which way they ultimately would get to Gordon Shelton.
Yeah, or Carl Silver. So down here, you'd connect to Carl Silver. So you're either going to connect to Gordon Shelton Boulevard or Carl Silver Boulevard.
Okay. I mean, yeah, in theory, that could go down that way.
Correct. Right? So that depends on the final alignment. Just a word to the public, where we are at the study stage right now is we're not going to pick the exact alignment. What FAMPO is going to do is pick a corridor that they think will be the best for the region. But when you do the final NEPA assessment, the VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation engineers, would have to go out to the site and inspect the site, and there may be some physical items on site, which means that the road might have to move to the left or move to the right, or it's not it's not a case of just picking the corridor now and you're done.
Right.
The NEPA process, that is the final step, will reevaluate that general area where you want to put the road, and we'll move it. It'll move left or right or up or down or whatever. We don't know, but that depends on the final, and lots of engineers involved in that. There's again a public participation process. So once they've worked out what obstacles there are in the path of the roadway, they will tweak that idea into a usable final alignment, and then they go back to the public and and ask for public input on that adjusted corridor to show which is the most likely to be built, and the public comment on that again to say it's too close to my house, or have you thought about this other problem? And so there's another round of opportunity for public comment and amendments to the alignment.
And you have been consistently vocal in saying just because there's a line on a map doesn't mean that's the definitive line on the map.
Correct.
And therefore people, and so I'm just repeating what I heard from you for many a time.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah,
it's the rough, you've been listening. It's the rough idea of where a new roadway is likely to be built, but there's lots of water under the bridge before we get there.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. And one of the things that has to happen is soil samples and rock samples, and you've got to look at the gradient down to the river, and are you going to impact any environmental issues on site? So we haven't had any sampling done and all that kind of thing, which VDOT would do when they're in the final NEPA assessment. That still has to be done. So it's a two-phase thing. This phase is preparing the rough corridor idea, and then the NEPA and VDOT and another public engagement process would choose the final alignment, which is another body of work that still has to happen.
And to a large degree, it makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't want, or logic wouldn't want, or people who don't want to waste money wouldn't want. You just sit there and say, well, here's, rough idea, loads of different plans, look at all these, and then say, okay, let's go and do soil samples on 500 or 50 or 20 different plans. You want to narrow it down so that you're not doing, and I think there's one point somewhere along here where one side of the river's higher. I think the city side is way higher. So the
gradient.
Thank you. That was the word. The gradient would just be at a wrong slope. Therefore, it make it very problematic for the cars and the vehicles to be going. And so therefore that would sort of negate even looking at that one just because of the topography. So a lot of this is let's wean out all those things before we start doing the really in-depth studying of it.
Yeah, so you also want to get some public input as well as doing your overview of the environment and of the gradient and of the alignment, and you also have to try and pick which road either side you're going to connect the bridge to, because that will affect the project as well. So when you've got that rough idea agreed, you've already told the folks doing the final NEPA assessment, first of all, that there's some public support to do this. Second of all, that you've got a rough corridor that you want to use, and that you're committed to doing it. So there's a number of things already on the table. The NEPA phase then says, okay, if this is what you want to do, we'll help you do it better. And then they go and fix the things that you might not have thought of, and that might become aware when they do intense on-site investigation. So that's why that is. Your first phase, what we're doing now, really reduces the options to what's workable and what has some public support and what has looked at the environmental impacts to a degree already to say, hey, these ones are, that's how we basically sidelined the option of going up Greenbank Road, is because really there's just too many impacts.
Right.
So that came out of the study. We looked at it as an option. We realized too many homes are going to be impacted. Let's not do that. And so that's the first option that I think really is off the table, and now we're slowly narrowing those other options as we get closer to the mark, to picking an option that's preferred, or we could pick two. Worst case scenario, pick two, but that limits it to just two that the NEPA phase has to deal with. We preferably we'll pick one, but we could pick a close second and say this one or the close second, go and tell us what the best alignment is. And then VDOT and NEPA will get involved.
Now, and some people may already know this, but a lot of people probably don't know it. But the whole germination of coming up with this for the 30 years, there have been different, and I'm not going to expect you to go back all 30 years and know the nuances of all of the various
We can,
things.
but it'll take a long time.
But I mean, there's all the options that have been looked at are east of the reservoir, Matron Reservoir.
Yes, there was a
Initially,
proposal. There was a proposal at one stage to build a complete outer connector, which would be quite far out. That would have gone through Culpeper and Orange County, but that never really got beyond the conceptual stage. Nobody committed to it, and so it hasn't gone further. But that was quite far out. But I think there may in the future be some elements of that plan that might be brought back, particularly east of I-95, where there's been talk in Spotsylvania about a possible new crossing at New Post, which sort of follows the kind of alignment that outer connector was considering back then. So there are elements that hang around and other elements which there's not enough support for.
Right. And so, and you did your staff and people and consultants did a really in-depth study about the traffic going south on 95 and then going north on 95. And I mean, I don't expect you to go through all of it, but I mean, if you give a little thumbnail sketch of how in-depth in the findings of that, it was sort of, I think that was very interesting to a lot of people in the audiences in your public sessions, that people were just like, whoa, okay, that's really different.
So we're using big data analysis, which tracks the movement of thousands of vehicles across the river. Where do they come from? Where do they go? We eliminated vehicles that travel from outside of the state because they're just through traffic. They're just going to go up and down 95 or up and down US 1. They're not local traffic. And what we're trying with this bridge is to find a route for local folks to get between Spotsylvania, the city, and Stafford without having to get on I-95. So the study really looked at, well, where is everybody else coming from and going to? And aside from the Walmart in southern Stafford, everybody else, by far the bulk of people, are trying to get between Central Park and southern Stafford. They're crossing the river between those two general areas. As I say, the Walmart is the third most popular reason people cross the river.
Walmart, yeah.
So people from northern Spotsy and the city cross to Ferry Farm to go to the Walmart. But aside from that need, which is serviced by 3 different bridges already, the other big need is to get from southern Stafford across the river to Central Park, or from northern Spotsy across the river to southern Stafford, west of I-95. So the big need is west of I-95 because there are no bridges for 41 miles over the Rappahannock River, west of I-95. East of I-95, there's the US 1 set of bridge. There's the Chatham Bridge. There's the Route 3 bridge. There are many bridges, right? But there's only one west. And so while lots of folks are going to the Walmart in southern Stafford, those that are going somewhere else, they're not catered to because they're trying to connect north and south of the river, west of the I-95, which is why we're trying to look at a bridge in that general vicinity, because there's so many people who are making that trip every day, but they have to go around. They have to do what we call the reverse C. They go down US 17, they go up US 1, and then they go up Route 3, right? Or the other way around. They go down Route 3, up US 1, that difficult intersection between Route 3 and, between US 1 and 17 in Stafford. That intersection is going to become, over time, one of the most problematic intersections in the county, because they're trying to get west, or they from the west and they're trying to get east, and they intersect with US 1 to get to the shops or to get to school or wherever it is they're trying to go to. And so that movement is in a congested area, too many people trying to make it, and there's no other way. If you're in Western Stafford and you want to get to the big hospital, you've got to go under I-95 and to US 1 and then back west again to get back to the hospital. And that at each one of those major intersections, it's just traffic, particularly in peak hour, rush hour, in the 5 o'clock in the afternoon. When you have to do that, it's hard to do.
Awesome. Okay. And so where, as of now, you said they're going to come out back with recommendation maybe 2, then there'll be a NEPA study. How cost issues, then that comes into play once.
Sure.
How does it go from a plan, eventually it'll be a plan, then we have to pay for it, and that's going to be interesting.
So it's likely to cost between $200 and $300 million, but it's a long-term permanent asset. It'll last, right, and it'll serve generations of people. In terms of how do we fund it, there are multiple ways. There is the possibility of applying to Smart Scale, because Smart Scale does fund very large projects sometimes. And when they fund a project, they fund it 100%. They don't give you 50% and you've got to fund the rest. So that's a good way if you are cash strapped. If they score the project well, they will fully fund it. That's one option.
And I will sort of give the other side of the options as we go. But the question then would be if there are other projects in the area that FAMPO would like to do, and Smart Scale is going to fund this 100%, they would be not funded because there's only a finite amount of funds.
So Smart Scale is complicated, and I don't want to get your audience into all the different complications. But there are 2 broad pots of funding in Smart Scale. The one is for local jurisdictions to apply for. That money is allocated per district and it's ring-fenced. So it'll all go to something in the district, but depending on your project's score, your project will get it or the other county will get it, but it stays within the district. And then there's high priority project funding, which you compete across the whole state, and that's for the really big projects.
Okay, and so ideally
and
that
so
would pay for
if
that.
everybody has a big bridge in the same year, you'll struggle. But if one year then nobody has a big bridge and you have the bridge, you're not in so much competition for the funding. It always depends on who else puts in a project. But it is a very good result if you get it, because they don't ask you for matching funds.
Right.
Unless up front you put in matching funds to try and get your score up.
That's right.
But that's entirely up to you as a jurisdiction or a set of jurisdictions to or FAMPO can put in the application on behalf of the jurisdictions. Okay. The next option would be a federal grant, but federal grants are generally there are a small number of exceptions, but generally federal grants are all 80-20. So the federal government gives you 80% of the money, cash, but in order to access it, you've got to put down the other 20% of the funding. And so the jurisdictions would have to come up with a 20% match. And in this case, it'll be multiple jurisdictions because it's crossing the river. So de facto, there's multiple jurisdictions. But they would have to come up with a 20% match to fund that. Again, with that, there are also wrinkles. I don't want to go down every rabbit hole and give you every detail, but the general idea is it's an 80-20. The federal government gives you 80%, 20% you pay. Then there are one-off unusual grants, lots of little details and wrinkles. And then finally, if the region, and we put this to bed last year, the region was discussing whether or not they wanted a regional transportation authority.
Right.
It seems like there isn't the support currently this year, so it's off the table. But if that would come on the table in future, you could either fully fund it with the Regional Transportation Authority, or you could pay that 20% match that the federal government won't give you to build everything. So that is another option that one could use. And then finally, there are municipal bonds. So if Stafford and the city put out for bonds and raise the funds, they could also build it themselves without federal and state money. In practice, it's often a combination of all of these things. It's never just the one source. You can usually get a lot from the one source, and then you have to top up with one of the other sources. So it's usually a package of a combination of projects. And the more you put in some match, the more likely are somebody's going to give you the rest.
Right. Okay. And what's sort of, because we're talking, the Stafford hits the city, they're the only two entities that are dealing with it.
Currently, yes.
So it wouldn't be Spotsylvania or anybody else, because it's not technically touching Spotsylvania land.
At the moment, that's true,
Right.
yes.
Okay. All right. And you've pretty much said how people can get involved. They just sort of keep an eye out, see what's going on. And then after this, or in tangent with this, or a parallel road of this, are there any other big issues you're looking at as far as FAMPO, while this is going on its track, that you're also looking for future fund?
Yeah, so Spotsylvania County asked us to do a new mini study of the potential. So it's a feasibility type assessment of the potential of building another bridge over the river at New Post. So you've got the 301 bridge over the river, and then you've got the Route 3 bridge over the river. So in between that, it's quite a long distance. If you just happen to unfortunately live in the wrong spot or work in the wrong spot, you might have a long way around to get there. So the FAMPO is now just looking at a mini study just to establish who would use a road and a bridge like that. Would it relieve congestion? And what it would look like in future. By when would that bridge be necessary? We might not need it in terms of the traffic right now today, but it's likely in 20 years or 30 years we would need additional facility like that. So we are already doing a little micro study of that particular project. So we're not going to take it to NEPA and Smart Scale and all that. It's just an initial assessment to say, would this be necessary and what would that look like? So we're working on that.
So the people who aren't as familiar with New Post, okay, so if you have the Route 3 bridge and you go to Ferry Farm, are we talking into King George?
No.
Or it'd be basically
the bridge,
South Stafford?
Yeah, the bridge would be between South Stafford and Spotsylvania.
Okay.
But it's towards the King George boundary, but not that far. The New Post area is there's a residential area in Spotsylvania before you get to King George County or Caroline County.
Okay.
So it's down, if you're in Stafford, it's down Route 3 towards King George, but not as far as King George.
Right.
There would need to be a new bridge and a new section of roadway that links to Route 3.
Okay. All right. No, sorry. Then you were talking about another agent.
No problem. We're currently involved with another small study, which is what we call a complete street study. We're looking at everything other than the private motor vehicle. So buses, transit, and bicycles and pedestrians and people who are in strollers or wheelchairs that need to move along the roadways in the urban parts of the region. So we're not looking at rural areas. The study only focuses on alternative modes of transportation in the very urban areas. So it's looking at things like, do the sidewalks connect to each other, or are there big gaps? Do we have a bike path that doesn't go anywhere? Well, it should go somewhere, so what should we do about that? And networking the wishes and aspirations of Spotsylvania, Stafford, and the city in terms of their future plan for building a network of sidewalks, bike paths, bus stops. So we're going to be talking to Fred Transit about where they plan to put the new bus stops and bus shelters and other accommodations to make it more human and feasible to use buses. Because if you're in the bad weather and you're waiting for a bus, there's nothing for you. But Fred is committed to buying bus shelters and putting up new signage and all sorts of things that we want to locate where those are on a plan, so that everybody knows, oh, I can ride my bike to the bus stop and there's a bus shelter, so if it rains, I can stand inside. So we want to network those things. So we try to build a network in the urban areas. So we're not going to go into the rural parts of some of the counties, like far west, where you don't really have anything urban out there. It's, small communities or some farmland and lakes and parks and forests and all that good stuff. But we're not going to build heavy infrastructure out there because it's rural in nature and countryside.
And I found it when I got on the planning commission really interesting how devoid of sidewalks our area is. There was just an anathema to putting sidewalks in, which is like now people are thinking they want to walk to places and there's no sidewalks to go from point A to point B. So your study sort of makes sense.
And it varies. Some folks don't touch my front yard. I don't want a sidewalk. I don't want anything. But then there are other folks, for example, Northern Stafford, the very urban part of Northern Stafford, they're like, why don't we have any sidewalks? Why don't we have any bike paths? And so they want funding for more bike paths and more sidewalks and more facilities, right? So I guess it depends on your community and also your stage in life. Some people, when they're retired, want to get a bike and start riding. Other people, when they're 40 years old, I don't have time to ride a bike. I've got to go to work. Leave me alone. It depends on the type of environment, the community, but also the stage in life they're at and their needs. I often see somebody cycling from Stafford to a job or a university. I don't know exactly where they're going, but in the city of Fredericksburg, right? They're either going to college or they're going to a job, and they cycle down US 1 on their bike, and I think it's very dangerous. There's no protected anything when you're on a bicycle on US 1. Mm-hmm. And when you cross US 1 on your bike, you got to be careful. I think we should be upgrading the safety of that sort of area so that people can ride their bike into the city or into Stafford without danger. And so there's a pressure being put right now on the governor to intervene and add some funding to the renovation of the US 1 bridge at Falmouth, which is being renovated anyway. And all the localities are putting pressure on the governor to say, we just a little extra money and we can put a protected shared use path down one side of the bridge so that pedestrians and bike riders and people in strollers will be protected from a truck that might fall over, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll see whether we're able to do that. There's a whole lot of moving parts there, so I don't know what the end result will be, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking at with this little mini study, is like, where can we network the urban areas together so that people can cycle to the library safely, that people can walk to school safely, etc.
Right, and it's as I said, it's just when we were there was one development that was being talked about that was going to be right next to an elementary school, and it was amazingly difficult for certain entities to understand that having a sidewalk through that neighborhood with a way to get to the elementary school was a lot more sane than saying, okay, everybody's going to have a bus going and go that way. It's a That's what I mean. It was a different cultural mindset.
Yeah. Very short distances, you might not need the bus, but you do need a protected sidewalk.
Yes.
Especially if it's young children. You don't want them, even middle-aged children, you don't want them walking on the street.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Or coming out by a car and you can't see them. Yep. So some closing thoughts, because thank you it's been really great information, which I think is very useful for the community to know, because the local media has shifted over the last 5 years, 6 years. So how people are getting information is a lot different than what it used to be. You've already talked about what future needs. So I guess finally, we usually ask people if they have any happy stories or happy things about Stafford that they know, that they feel they want to share with the listeners and watchers.
Yeah, there's some lovely places around the place. There are lots of historical places. One that I particularly enjoyed, I went to a function there, is the Chatham Heights area. There's a facility there which I think the county owns. Is an arts community, but they're also a venue for lovely meetings and soirees and cocktail parties and whatever else is needed. But the facility is really beautiful, lovely gardens. It's the kind of like historical place where if you look after it, keep it in a good nick, you have things to hand on to the next generation that are really nice. It's stylish, it's well maintained, lovely grounds and gardens. And there are a number of these types of places around Stafford County and in the localities nearby that I think make this area, because you can't find those when you're in a city built up of apartment blocks. You don't have enough space.
Right.
But you've got the space to have these kinds of facilities which are really nice and make the area.
And it ties into our historical
absolutely
background in our
the history of the place, and a lot of those historical buildings are still here. And if we maintain them and look after them and give them, sometimes you've got to change the purpose, but you keep the building intact, right?
Yep.
You just give it a new purpose and a new lease on life. And they've done that with a number of these older buildings, and I think that's great. It's good for the area. It's good to keep that historical perspective and don't turn everything into a concrete bridge, right? There's certain areas you want to look after.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ian.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate Ian Ollis for being with us today and talking to us about transportation, one of the favorite topics of our area. And we hope you'll be on again as this progresses and maybe get
Thank
more
you.
information on those other projects.
Great. Good speaking to you. Have a good one.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks again, Ian, for sharing your time and your insights with us. Your knowledge and experience really helps us understand this topic more fully. You've given us a lot to consider, and we'll see where it goes. That being said, I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us on this episode. And this being February, it is appropriate to talk about presidents because President's Day is in February. And during my winter break, I read a book about Woodrow Wilson written by former Congressman Christopher Cox. It was very insightful. It focused on Woodrow Wilson's racism and his efforts to block women getting the right to vote. And it's a part of history that I don't think people know a lot about. And so it's well worth people going to get the book. It's one of the things that you do when you have friends, you recommend good books. And so as your friend, I'm recommending this as a good book to read. And speaking of friends, we would like to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for their kind donation to this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center on 215 Kings Highway. Next time you're in the area, stop by and treat yourself. You'll be glad you did. Until next time, I'm Tom Coen, and you're listening to Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcast, or you can catch the video on our YouTube channel. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.